Hello, friends. Your boy Jeff with you again. Doing another book review video. I'm continuing in the almost never-ending Stephen King reading project. And for those of you that are just catching up, if you're watching this for the first time, what I'm doing is I tracked down all of Stephen King's books in hardcover, and I've been alternating between reading things of his that I haven't read before, and even though I've been reading King books for 40 years now, there have been a few things that I haven't read before. I'm not completely current with everything of his. And I'm alternating that with revisiting books of his that I remember really enjoying many years ago, however long it may be. So this time around, I've also included his kid, Joe Hill, in the equation because he and Stephen King co-wrote two stories that are in this collection, the short story collection called Full Throttle. So I kind of cheated a little bit and read this collection, filing it under the never before read part of the project. So I'm not completely unfamiliar with Joe Hill. I've read his I've read two other of his books. I read The Fireman, which was the first thing of his that I ever read, a very long novel, which I thought was okay. You know, it had its good points and its bad points. I thought it ran on a little too long. Be that as it may. And then I also read Strange Weather, which was a collection of novellas, which kind of follows in the tradition of his dad, like with books like Different Seasons and Four Past Midnight. They're a collection of four longer stories. And I enjoyed that one quite a bit more than I did The Fireman. This one here is a short story collection, and I've enjoyed this one even more than the other two that I just mentioned. I really dug this book. Just about every story in here worked for me. It was a winner. In terms of writing, you can see a lot of the King tendencies in his writing. He gets a little floored with his writing at times. He's starting to develop certain like tics and patterns, and you longtime King readers know what I'm talking about. I think there's even been discussions on it on the Hail to Stephen King message board website, Facebook site. That's what I mean. And but overall, I thought this was an excellent collection. This is his brand new release. This just came out, and of the stories in here, I'm not gonna really go story by story and tell you what they're all about because they're short stories, and if I talk about them too much, I'm gonna ruin them for you. But the one that I do want to mention, actually the one that was my favorite in this book, was the one that was original to this collection. It was called Late Returns. And here's the back. Again, not to talk about it too much to spoil it, but it's kind of a time-traveling ghost story. And it was kind of unique in this collection because almost all of these stories have, kind of nasty endings. It's most of these stories are horror related, some are suspense, and Joe Hill isn't afraid to go to the gory gross out scene, much like his dad, which is fine. I like that. But Late Returns was kind of a sweet, it wasn't really a horror story. It wasn't really suspense. It was kind of like a sweet ghost story. And that was my favorite one in this book. But there were many others in here that were almost as good. Even the title story, which was just called Throttle, which was one of the ones he co-wrote with his dad, was a reimagining of the Richard Matheson story Duel, which was made into a TV movie by Steven Spielberg. It was like one of his first movies, if not his first. And famous story, and these two guys kind of reimagine it with a biker gang. You've got the big semi chasing a biker gang. It was a pretty fun read. Um, just like his dad, I also went back and picked up all of the books by Joe Hill that I didn't have in hardcover. So you'll be seeing some of his books in the mix here and there, especially once I've exhausted all of the King books that I haven't read before. I'll be mixing him in a lot more. But if you're interested at all in seeing if Stephen King's kid can write, the answer is yes, and he's quite a good writer in his own right, I think, by far, at least in the short story realm. I'm not 100% convinced about his novel skills yet. I still have, there were a couple of his other books that are novels of his that I haven't read yet. So, on that regard, the jury's kind of still out for me. But in terms of short stories and even novellas, I think Joe Hill is aces. He's easily right up there with his dad in being able to produce a well-written short story. So, if you're interested in getting a little taste of his writing without having to commit to a big long novel, this would be a good place to start. Full Throttle by Joe Hill. Really enjoyed this book. I ended up reading this, I ended up doing almost a story a day. I think there was a day or two where I actually read 2 or 3, but, in between all of the things that's been going on with my wife and her health, haven't had time to play records. I don't really want to put headphones on for the obvious reasons, in case I'm needed and she's trying to call for me. So I haven't really been able to pursue music all that much, but it has left me with a fair amount of quiet time that I've put towards reading. So, my morning routine would be to make coffee and then read a story out of this book. Or, I usually have been able to make it through an entire story in a sitting with my morning coffee. So for the last, week, almost 2 weeks, this has been my morning companion. So I've really come to enjoy this book. It was really quite good. So it's got my highest recommendation. Full Throttle by Joe Hill. Go get it. Really quite good. Now, reverting to the other side of the project, when revisiting works by Stephen King that I enjoyed reading the first time, however long ago it was, going back to the Dead Zone. This is going to be what I'm going to start next. Of course, I remember reading this back in probably the early 80s. I had the paperback of this. It was the one with Christopher Walken on the cover. It was like the movie tie-in edition of the story. So, well familiar with the Dead Zone. This is pretty much where the whole Castle Rock universe started. I think this was the first novel or story of his that featured Castle Rock or characters who lived in that town. So, this is the book club edition. Again, I wasn't able to find a true first edition, but that's okay. As long as it's in hardcover, that's all I need. And this book's in good shape. I've got it in a clear book cover. You can see, it's kind of necessary because the spine here is starting to get kind of frayed at the edges. So, and of course, I got to show you the author pick of of Stephen King, circa 1979. You got to dig that. So, yeah, I remember this book pretty well. I remember enjoying reading it. I'm looking forward to doing it again. It's been at least 35 years since I've read it. So this is going to be the next stop on my project with reading the books of Stephen King. We're going back to the Dead Zone. So at some point in the future, you'll be seeing this book again, and I'll be talking a little bit more about it. I remember the general storyline, but revisiting all the details is where it'll really refresh my memory. So looking forward to doing this. And yeah, so far I've been able to keep going with this project at a pretty decent for me pace. I'm kind of I'm averaging like almost 3 books a month. So now it's a new month. We're about into November, so the colder weather always kind of makes me want to read more anyway. So, all right, that's going to be it for me for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys further along the path of being. So until then, take care. It's your boy Jeff. See you again soon.